This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. We're pleased to announce that we are now selling our physical magazines directly on our website. You can browse by magazine title or search for a particular issue using the search bar. To pay us a visit, please click the link in the description. Enjoy. Colorado's rugged mountain trails have echoed for centuries with tales of gold, grit, and ghostly mystery. In this video, we bring you 3 of the Centennial State's most enduring treasure legends, stories steeped in hard truth and high country folklore. First, we'll follow the curious case of Alex Cobsky, a reclusive herder who staggered into Pueblo with burros loaded down with ore so rich it made headlines, and then disappeared into legend. Then we'll trail 2 nameless prospectors, a Dutchman and an Irishman, whose secret gold mine in the hills above Fort Collins vanished as mysteriously as they did. Finally, we'll ride alongside the notorious Reynolds Gang, whose stagecoach heist near Kenosha Pass left behind a buried fortune that's never been found. Together, these stories paint a portrait of a Colorado past where riches came sudden, vanished swift, and left behind only whispers on the wind. Back in the spring of 1901, when folks still looked at the mountains like they were hiding secrets, and often enough they were, a lean, sharp-eyed prospector by the name of Alex Cobsky came trudging into Pueblo, Colorado, with 2 burros so heavy-laden their knees near buckled. What he brought to the smelter that day lit up the papers coast to coast. That ore of his, rich with gold like something out of Montezuma's dreams, assayed at a thumping $40,000 a ton, richer than anything most smelters had ever seen. Cobsky walked away with $12,500, and just like that, the old legends were new again. Then, as quick as he'd come, Cobsky vanished back into the hills. A few months later, he came back, same way, same burros, same twinkle in the eye, and this time sold another fat load of gold-bearing ore for $17,500. Now the buzz wasn't just gossip, it was thunder. People pressed him for answers. Where was this gold coming from? But Cobsky wasn't talking. All anybody got was that he'd found an old shaft somewhere while herding goats in the southern Colorado mountains. Beyond that, he was tighter-lipped than a preacher in a poker hall. That was all the excuse the old-timers needed to revive an old ghost, the Simpson Mine. Back in 1869, a fella named Jack Simpson had struck free gold near Silver Mountain up by Levada Pass. He made one run to town with his haul and then, as the story goes, caught an arrow from a raiding party before he could return. Nobody ever found the mine again until, maybe, Alex Cobsky's goats stumbled across it. The ore sure matched, and so did the mystery. But gold does funny things to a man. Cobsky, for all the fortune he'd stumbled on, lived more like a hunted coyote than a rich man. He came into town maybe twice a year. Pueblo, Levada, Denver. Always in good spirits, talkative and generous. Folks liked him. His nieces and nephews, long lost and reunited after the newspaper stories made him famous, adored him. One year, he gave each of the children a gold nugget to play with, like it was marbles. But once he left the edge of town, the man changed. He'd hide in the brush beside the trail, sometimes for hours, just to make sure no one was tailing him. He traveled by night, doubled back often, and was always back in his cabin by dawn. When strangers wandered too close to his domain, they'd get a rifle barrel pointed straight at their chest. Even the sheriff learned not to push him. One time, Sheriff Carl Swift tried to disarm him, and Cobsky just went into Denver and came back with a legal permit for the iron on his hip. His cabin, they say, was tucked into the mountain like a lizard in a crevice. A few people knew it existed, but nobody knew where his mine was. Some said the hills were rigged with death traps and spring-loaded rifles, and just the thought of them was enough to keep even the boldest prospectors at bay. Only once in more than 30 years did anyone outside the family step foot inside that cabin. A farmer by the name of Teddy Gibbons, who was just a boy at the time, got tuckered out while prospecting with some older boys and was left in Cobsky's care. Cobsky led him into the cabin and even showed him the vault door that led to the mine. "You can't go any further, boy," he said. I'm the only man on earth goes past that door, and I always will be." Behind that door, said Cobsky, was gold enough to blind the sun, and maybe some traps to match. Gibbons never told a soul until long after the old man was dead, and even then he said it with a kind of reverence. Cobsky had made him promise to keep quiet, and Teddy kept that promise out of respect, and maybe a little fear too. To the townsfolk of La Veta, Cobsky was two men, the kindly, talkative fellow who passed out nuggets and laughed easily, and the wild-eyed hermit who prowled the hills with a cocked rifle and a haunted heart. After a while, folks quit trying to know which one was real. When he was finally brought down, not by gold fever or gunfire, but by a motorcar that struck him on a lonely stretch of road, he was about 80, broke, and half out of his mind. He died in the Colorado State Hospital in Pueblo in March of 1937, with nothing in his pockets but dust. Cobsky left his mine to his kin in Denver, Mrs. Anna Reicht, Mrs. Elizabeth Wiebold, and a grandnephew named Howard Ropenek. But with the old man gone, the lawsuits rolled in. Seems Cobsky had never filed an official claim. Ropenek took a mining engineer up to the site, but they found nothing worth fighting for. The engineer told them to walk away, and they did. And maybe that was for the best, because there are some around La Veta who still believe the real mother lode wasn't behind that vault door at all. They say Cobsky moved it, hid it where no man would ever find it. They say he meant to take it with him, and maybe in a way he did. As one old-timer put it, tipping his hat toward the mountain, Alex Cobsky's gold is still up there sure enough, but so is Alex. Back in the early 1860s, when the frontier still had more mystery than map, a Dutchman and an Irishman drifted into old Fort Collins, Colorado. They were rough as corn husks, sun-baked and trail-worn. But what caught everybody's eye wasn't the men. It was the gold they brought in. Raw nuggets, yellow as sunrise and just as bright, traded straight across the sutler's counter for whiskey, tobacco, and a fog of forgetfulness. They drank like they'd been born with dust in their throats. Then, as sudden as they'd come, they vanished. No trace, no trail. A few weeks later, back they came, same as before, but with more gold. Then it happened again, and again. Each time they returned with heavier sacks and lighter stories. Folks at the fort started scratching their heads. Where in the high lonesome were they pulling this gold from? It didn't take long before curiosity turned to suspicion. Some soldiers pooled together and hired a Comanche scout to tail him. The Indian took off light, figuring the mine must be just a ways up the Cache La Poudre. But he followed them 3 days straight into the mountains, and the snow came down like flour from a torn sack. Hungry and half lost, he turned aside to chase a deer for food. By the time he got back, the trail was wiped clean by the storm, the footprints buried like secrets under fresh powder. He had to turn back empty-handed and empty-stomached. Not long after, the Dutchman and Irishman reappeared, gold in tow and a new mule under pack. Next time, they traded up for an ox, saying it could haul more ore. That ox made a few trips with them, but one day they came back without it, claiming a bear got to it. Folks shrugged. Frontier life was full of that kind of story. But this time the pair stayed longer, drinking harder. Somewhere between the bottom of the bottle and the end of their patience, they fell into a row. Words turned to fists, and fists to knives. The Dutchman wound up dead and the Irishman wound up roped. The soldiers were sick of guessing. They told the Irishman plain, "Tell us where the gold's coming from, or we'll stretch your neck under that old cottonwood yonder." He just stared at him with the hard look of a man who's carried too many secrets too far to give him up now. So they strung him up, but only for a moment, long enough to scare the truth loose, only it didn't. The Irishman held his silence tighter than any noose could squeeze. They let him down, but he never did speak of that mine. To this day, folks still talk about the lost lode of the Dutchman and the Irishman, somewhere up the Cache La Poudre, where the snow hides trails and secrets die with the men who made them. It was down in the high country of Colorado, back when the West still had more wild in it than law, that the legend of the Reynolds Gang first took root. Folks still whisper about the gold they took and the trail they left, though the winds have long since scattered the ashes of their campfires, and time has worn smooth the boot tracks in Handcart Gulch. Jim and John Reynolds were born of Texas stock, drifters by trade and Confederates by sentiment. They came ambling up through the mining camps around Fairplay and Tarriel, hats pulled low and hands ready to work a pan or a pistol, whichever proved more profitable. Like many a starry-eyed fortune seeker, they tried their luck digging gold, but their shovels turned up more blisters than bullion. So they turned to a different sort of prospecting, the kind that involved other men's pockets. By the time the war between the states was heating up back east, Jim and John had assembled a small brotherhood of hard-bitten rogues with itchy trigger fingers and a fondness for Dixie. They figured that stealing Yankee gold to fund the Confederacy was as noble as war ever gets, though they didn't always wait for Yankees to carry it. Their biggest claim to infamy came in 1864, when they held up the McClellan and Spotswood stage near McLaughlin Station, not far from where Como, Colorado now stands. Some say the take was $60,000 in freshly mined gold. Others reckon it was nearer to $100,000. Most often, you hear $60,000, and that's the number that has rattled around treasure hunter circles for well over a century. Whatever the sum, at today's gold prices, it'd make a poor man rich and a rich man richer. But that wasn't the gang's first rodeo. Earlier, down in New Mexico, they had relieved a wagon train of $63,000 in gold and then lit out for the jagged folds of the Spanish Peaks. When some of the boys got to feeling that maybe patriotism ought to pay out sooner than later, Jim decided the treasure was safer underground than in hot hands. He buried it in the hills and rode north with John, dreaming of bigger scores, like robbing the Denver Mint. They never got that far. Their luck ran short on the banks of the South Platte, where they were caught off guard cooking beans at twilight. A posse of greenhorn vigilantes stumbled across their camp in Handcart Gulch. Shots rang out, the outlaws scattered like quail, and in the confusion, Jim's freshly buried cache was left behind, never to be seen again. Jim was soon caught and hauled to Denver. His brother John slipped the net and vanished. As for Jim and 4 of his captured partners, they were turned over to the 3rd Colorado Cavalry for safekeeping, a decision about as wise as using a coyote to guard the chicken coop. 30 miles outside of town, the cavalry stopped, and by sundown, all 5 outlaws lay dead. The official word was attempted escape, but frontier justice didn't always wait for a fair trial. John Reynolds' trail grows cold after that. Some say he doubled back, found the loot, and wasted it chasing cantina girls and bottle bottoms until a Mexican rancher put an end to him. Others believe he never found the gold at all, and that it still lies beneath the rocks and pines of Handcart Gulch, waiting for a sharp-eyed dreamer with a pickaxe and a good deal of luck. And so the story stands, half fact, half fog. But if you ever find yourself hiking near Kenosha Pass and your boot heel strikes something that clinks, well, it might just be the ghost of Jim Reynolds nodding in approval from somewhere in the shade. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.